Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. So, it's a Sangha Sunday today, and one of the things that happens on Sangha Sunday is members have the opportunity to give a wayfinding talk. And this is an opportunity for a member who's practiced, who's a member, that's all you have to be, to talk about how you came to practice, how you, a little bit about yourself, to share how your life has sort of led you to this place where you're sitting on Sunday with a bunch of people at Zenwest. So this is one of those ideas that when I proposed it, people were very enthusiastic about it. But having people step up to do that has been really challenging. Put the invitation out. If you want to do this, say so. But it's almost, I don't know that there's been anybody who's actually said, okay, I'll do that, without me saying, hey, you specifically, do you want to do that? So this led me to some thinking about a lot of things that have been going on in my life and the areas that I've been exploring. And it all kind of leads to a single concept or a single word that I want to talk about today, which is kan. In Japanese, kan, which means barrier. And it's the part of the title of one of the main books in our tradition, which is the Mumon Kan. And Mumon means, mu is like no, and kan means gate, and mon means gate, and kan means barrier. So no gate barrier, or the gateless barrier. That's the name of the text. And this idea of kan, the barrier, is something that is really central to our practice, and I think to our lives as human beings. And down in Choboji, Seattle, there's actually a calligraphy, and it's just a single character, which is kan! It's this big, very dramatic character. Barrier! So what to say about it? Each of us, I think, has barriers. And these barriers come up in every aspect of our lives. And almost always, when we are confronted with a barrier and we're challenged to respond to a barrier, it's very interesting, I found, that the first word of any response that we can make to a barrier almost has to be I. And the barriers come up from the time that we're very young. The sort of perfect scene for me that comes up in mind of an early barrier is a a roller skating rink that I used to go to when I was a kid. And we'd all be roller skating around to the hits of the 80s. And then a slow song would come, and the rink would clear completely. And the challenge becomes, are you going to go out there for the slow song? Are you going to go and ask that person? And there is a felt resistance. And if someone says, "Hey, why aren't you roller skating?" You have to say, and then whatever your excuse is. "Oh, I'm really thirsty. Oh, I have to go to the bathroom. Oh, I don't like slow music. Oh, I don't like this song." But it's always I. The barrier to participate in that is I. And it goes on and on in our lives. I think dancing is another great one. I went to a really fun show on Thursday evening after Keegan's folk orchestra. We went to see the Foghorn String Band, which is like a Dixieland, or not Dixieland, what's the word? Bluegrass. And there was all kinds of dancing going on there, like everything from little jigs to, at one point, 2 circles of square dancing in this little tiny place. And there's a whole bunch of people there tapping their feet and tapping on the tables and everything like that. But I watched a lot of people being asked to dance that were like, "Oh, no, I." A lot of resistance. And we see it in chanting as well, where even when the chanting comes up, there's this opportunity to come into the center of the circle with even just our voices, and I arises. Kan. And it's through our lives, our relationships, our work, we're constantly being confronted by these barriers that force us to decide about whether we're going to act or whether we're going to remain still. I read a great piece once about the human brain and how in many ways we sort of have 2 brains. One is sort of more primal, way at the back of our head, and one is sort of more frontal, upper and frontal. And these 2 sections of our brain have 2 fundamentally different sort of priorities. The older brain, the lizard brain, they call it, at the back of your head is primarily concerned with maintaining the status quo and preserving the living function of the organism at all costs. And the upper one is more concerned with all the other kinds of things. So the older part of our brain is really quite powerful, and partly I think that's because it has a sort of a singularity of purpose that the rest of our brain doesn't have. It's sort of like, keep us alive, keep us from being eaten, try to get us to reproduce. It's very simple. And so we sort of live in this debate between a very strong, directive, clear purpose and more expansive outlook, reasoning, creative, inspired sort of part of our brain. And every time we face a conflict, every time we face one of these barriers, I really believe that in a lot of ways it's a conflict between these 2 parts of ourselves, these 2 brains or these 2 minds. The mind that is concerned with the protection of the organism would be happy to stay in the cave, really. Don't go out. There's bad things out there that can eat you. You might freeze to death, or it might be so hot you die. Who knows? What we have in the cave here is good. And you never know what's going to happen if you go outside the cave. It's primarily concerned with living. And the other side of our brain that wants to step out, wants to explore, one way of understanding this is that it's concerned with being alive. So these two things can sound the same, living and being alive. But in a lot of circumstances, they're really in opposition to one another. From a perspective of Buddhism, this is because the living component is one of solitary isolation in a lot of ways. I need to protect this organism, this body, this self. And the being alive component has more to do with feeling our place, feeling a part of, being unified with something which is much bigger than just me, ourselves. This habit we have, or this way of approaching life, or this way of experiencing life in which barriers arise, is a really challenging one. Because these barriers show up all over the place, all the time. And almost universally, it is more comfortable, more habitually easy, more simple to maintain the choice to stay on the sidelines, to avoid, to play it safe. But what is the barrier? That's the interesting point, and I think it's the point that Zen practice is really pointed directly at. What is this barrier? I think that the barrier is something that is acknowledged in all cultures and in all traditions, even in like modern pop culture. We have great phrases that clearly identify that we are aware. We can say, get over it. Or even better, get over yourself, which I think clearly nails what the issue is in those circumstances. We create a picture of ourselves, an image of ourselves, an idea of ourselves that conflicts with the reality or the circumstance that's arising in the moment. And when we can't reconcile those two things, we become unable to act, or we choose not to act. Because in the end, the images that we create about ourselves, the ideas that we have about ourselves and about our circumstances are just that. They're ideas. They're thoughts. They're images. They're pictures. They're expectations. But all of them are fundamentally empty. So the part of the reason that I'm talking about this stuff is because I'm, on a practical level, I'm engaged in Zen practice as a teacher with all of you. But further, I'm engaged in a much broader conversation about Zen practice in North America, both in the terms of like teacher-student transmission of the Dharma stuff, as well as in governance, organizational stuff. And in both of those branches, I've had a bunch of conversations in which people really are failing to see this this barrier, I feel. In the sort of organizational arm, in the practical arm of things, one of the things that I hear over and over again is about democracy, fairness, equality. And I hear all of those terms a lot. And even in our own organization, I am sort of under constant pressure to try to make the Zen West more democratic, to support that. But one of the things that has really struck me is that it's a lot of work, and actually one person cannot make an organization democratic. It's impossible. It's impossible for 2 or 3 or 4 people to make an organization democratic. It's required that every person in that organization takes up a voice and breaks down the barrier of self to participate. That's what's required. And people will shout from the cave, "We want to be able to come out of the cave." And you say, "Okay, nobody's stopping you from coming out of the cave." But you never see any heads. Sometimes you have to go down in the cave and say, "You can come out now!" But that's not it either. So we like to project, and we like to say the barrier is him, or the barrier is the structure, or the barrier is the organization. But I think this teaching that we have in Zen that points to the gateless barrier in each of us is what we have to focus on. We have to make our primary concern in our practice. In the teaching and transmission side of things, it's not as difficult because every case over and over and over again points to this barrier. And it's so completely simple. And I watch over and over again how this wonderfully crafted system and tradition and technique and teaching so compassionately but forcefully points us at this single thing over and over and over again. All the form we have, one of the examples I'm thinking of is just the form of interview. And I guess in some ways the tradition that we have in Rinzai of koan practice, it's all pointed to take you to the gate and give you very few options but to pass through. And then to watch through the wonderfully developed skills of awareness and mindfulness that we develop through practice, how we freak out at the mouth of the cave. We have this system where we're all sitting shoulder to shoulder, and then the boss sort of goes downstairs into the dragon's cave. And then interview starts, and there's this charge, and you go to the bell, and you sit in line, and you're focused on your koan. I'm going to use a very simple koan. For example, bring me the sound of the temple bell. Or, as I like to use here, bring me the sound of the big gong. And so, if I ask a 2-year-old to give me the sound of the temple gong, I've done this. 2-year-olds can actually, many of them, I shouldn't say all of them, but many of them can do it very convincingly right away. And I think that many people, when they hear the koan of bring me the big gong, know what they need to do, know how to do that. But I throw a bunch of swamp water on it. I throw form, and I throw bells, and I throw all the conditioning that you have about authority figures and waiting in a line, and build it until you're sitting in front of me and I say, give me the sound of the bell, and you're crippled. Sitting there in a conflict between knowing what needs to be done in this circumstance and being completely impotent to do anything about it. And then I don't jostle you or, prod you or anything. I just let you sit there. The door is open. All you have to do is walk through it. Well, I think maybe I should... I understand what the point of this... Oh, no. You need to walk through the door. That's all you have to do here. It's a koan that can be resolved in under a second. And as soon as you move towards the response, I already know you get it. So do it. Oh, okay. More zazen. You've got to sit at the door. It's a beautiful system. Because the truth is that we can talk about it. I can even tell you exactly what you need to do. And in many cases, even if I tell you what you need to do, it's like saying, go up on the stage and I don't know, like spin around, make a silly face, jump up and down. That's all you need to do to get the reward, or to whatever. And the person say, okay, go up on the stage, jump around, make a silly face, okay. But when you get up on stage, it's like all you can think about is the audience and, am I really an actor? Do I have any right to be up here? What will people think of me? What will my parents... I mean, it's like our head explodes with these concerns about self, and all we need to do is respond. And when the music's playing, all we need to do is dance. And when the snowball happens at the roller rink, all you need to do is go and take someone's hand and ask them if they want to skate. It's not so difficult. But we have the barrier, kan. And it's not, in some ways, it's not something we should laugh at, or it's not something that we should dismiss. It is a very real problem that we have to deal with. We have to address it. We have to become aware of how many times in a single day we are confronted, limited, directed. We make choices because of this barrier. The function of the Muman Kan, the gateless barrier, the function of Joshu's Mu, this character Mu, this teaching, empty, nothing, no, is for us to finally recognize that while we can acknowledge these barriers exist, we have to realize deeply in the core, right through to our marrow, that this stuff is empty. It's our mind. It's just concepts we come up with. The self, who we think we are, what we think we can and can't do, what we expect of ourselves and others, it's all empty. We just make that stuff up. We've said no to the people we really cared about. We've avoided the work that we could have really thrived at. We've prevented ourselves from being creative in so many ways, all because of a barrier that we just make up. One of the Red Pine is a translator, and he wrote a book on the Heart Sutra. And there was one line in it that I remember having a chat with another monk about, that was, we both agreed was just like so precisely accurate, but kind of, it sounded too funny to sort of keep in this, like to use as a regular thing, because as soon as you hear it, you kind of go, okay. So it was, having nothing to attain, the bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita with no hindrance in the mind. That's our translation of it. But Red Pine said, having nothing to attain, the bodhisattva relies on prajnaparamita without walls of the mind. That's the way that he translated it. Without creating these barriers, freely flowing, interacting with the life, the circumstances, the manifestation that's happening in front of you all the time. And this, for me, is one of the real, we have all this form, and we have all of this tradition. We have these wonderful teachings, and they're all wonderful. I love them. Obviously, I love them. But I think what's most important is that what we have to understand is that all of this stuff is pointing at something, and it's providing an opportunity for something. What I'd like to really press upon all of us is that our practice of engaging with this barrier and stepping through this barrier and experimenting and testing and experiencing what it is to be held back by that barrier. All of this stuff is about living awake. Or I guess you could say it's about having something which is more than just being alive. It's about living. So as much as there are members that just hate our tagline at Zenwest, which is we make Zen come alive. I use the term Living Zen for the podcast that we put up on the internet. But Living Zen is something that we are practicing, or I hope that we're practicing. And that is, how do we transform our lives from being a process of staying alive into the activity of genuinely living, wholeheartedly living, fully engaging in this dynamic unfolding of the cosmos. I just want to sort of read Wu Men's comment. Actually, I'm just going to read the first case. How about that? A monk asked Zhao Zu, "Does even a dog have Buddha nature?" Zhao Zu replied, "Mu," or no. Wu Men says, this is the part: "If you sincerely wish to practice Zen, you must pass through the barrier of the ancestors. If you wish to attain genuine insight, you must abandon the path of conceptual understanding. If you do not pass through this barrier and do not abandon the path of conceptual understanding, then your life will be that of a ghost, and you will be distracted and attached to whatever objects you stumble across. Tell me, what is the barrier of the ancestors? It is nothing other than this single word, mu. No. Empty. It is the front gate to the realization of the origin, and so it is called the gateless barrier of Zen. If you are able to pass through this barrier, not only will you meet Zhao Zu face to face, but you will also join hands and walk with the successive ancestors throughout time, entangling your eyebrows with theirs, seeing with the same eyes, and hearing with the same ears. Doesn't it sound wonderful? Isn't there anyone that wants to pass through this barrier? Arouse your entire body with its 360 bones and joints and its 84,000 pores of the skin. Give rise to a spirit of doubt. What are you doubting? Okay. And investigate this word, no. Keep it close to you always, both day and night. Refrain from creating concepts of vacancy or attaching to relative ideas of having or not having. It will feel just like you have just swallowed a red-hot iron ball, one that you cannot spit out, even if you try. All of the illusory ideas and delusive beliefs that you have accumulated and carried with you into the present moment will be extinguished, and with natural ease, the spontaneous unification of inside and outside will be realized. It will be realized, but you will be unable to express it, like a person who is unable to speak after waking from a wonderful dream. All of a sudden, an explosive transformation takes place, and you will astonish the heavens and shake the earth. Taking up the warrior's flaming sword, no opponent is your equal. Maybe taking up the flaming roller skates, no challenge is up to you. When you meet the Buddha, you kill the Buddha. When you meet the successive ancestors, you kill the successive ancestors. On the precipice of life and death, you are completely at ease. Regardless of where you find yourself or how you arrive, you enjoy a merry and playful samadhi. I ask you again, how do you manifest this realization? Employ every ounce of your energy to embrace this no. If you hold on without interruption, behold, a single spark and the ancestral candle is lit. A dog, Buddha nature, the pronouncement perfect and final. Before you say it has or has not, you are dead where you stand. So this case points ruthlessly at this barrier. And this word mu, no, it's often no. No is really hard, I think. And I think that in terms of when we say no, I think it's really easy to sort of make that into a thing. No. But I think if we're really to gain insight into this case, we have to understand that it is an unresponse. Some of the translations that I've heard for mu are without, or absent, or empty. So when we're practicing mu, if we're really practicing mu, then in our life situation, please be comfortable. I talk, so if you need to move, please, adjust your posture. In our life, we keep coming up to barriers, and we will always come up to barriers. And my hope as Zen practitioners, I would love to say my hope is that you will be able to clearly see through all of these barriers when they arise and simply walk through. But sometimes that's not the case. Sometimes we don't see the barrier. We take the barrier as being something totally real. But if we can just keep the mind of empty, that we can become aware when we're confronting a barrier and at least remind ourselves, empty. This is empty. I'm just making this obstacle up. It helps. When I was talking, an image popped into my head and I tried not to laugh too much. But one of the things that in practicing the Mu Koan is when you go to Sesshin and there's almost always somebody who's engaged with Mu. You're sitting in this endo and Sanzen starts and people are going in and out, in and out, in and out, and you hear lots of things, lots of sort of like peripheral noises coming out of the interview room. And the scene that comes up in my mind is from Harry Potter. And in the Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter goes to the train station and he's looking for platform 9 3/4, and he meets the Weasley family, of course. And he's sort of like, I'm looking for platform 9 3/4, and Mrs. Weasley says, "Oh, it's your first time, dear?" And he says, "Yeah." And she says, "Okay, well, point your cart right at the wall between platforms 9 and 10, and just walk through. That's the barrier to platform 9 3/4. And he kind of looks at her, and then she says, "It's best the first time if you do it at a bit of a run." And I think that this is very much the case with the koan mu. And in general, it is our tendency when we're confronting barriers that are barriers of the mind and that we're going through them, is that we really, in some degree, it's like an act of faith. And so when we're going to go on stage, even though we don't want to, we tend to go on stage with a little more pep than is really required. Or if we're going to confront the teacher, this is a great one, it always happens. Someone finally is just so tired of something I'm doing and they're going to talk to me, and often they come down into the interview room and they say, "You did this and this and this and this!" And I say, "Oh, okay, I won't do that anymore." And they're like, "Oh, oh, oh." But I realize that this is a part of the practice, and they're coming at the barrier at a bit of a run, because that's how we have to deal with barriers in the beginning. This is why the Mukuan is often so dramatic and explosive, because it's not about mu. It's not about this old case. We're dealing with barriers, this fundamental barrier of self for the first time maybe in our lives. And what happens is, the more we engage in this practice of confronting, recognizing these barriers as empty and walking through them, the less explosive, the less dramatic, the less of an obstacle it is. We can recognize, we can say, "Oh, I've created a gate, a barrier around this." But in the end, if I just kind of let go of my expectations and my fixations, I can actually walk through that barrier anytime I want. It's not so dramatic. Once we recognize that the abbot is reasonable, it's not so hard to go and talk to them. But I think what's also interesting to observe in that example is I've also had people who have done that more than one time. Having had a completely reasonable experience with me, it's totally possible the next time to have just as much angst about talking to me. It's set up that way. So, kan, barrier. In our lives, if we're engaging in Zen practice, our practice is to turn our awareness, to turn our hearts and our minds towards this unfolding activity, and to look into the gate, into the barrier between how we go about having a life and how we can go about living. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.